right, Temiko, let's go ahead and jump right in. Where I'd like to start with foreclosure and repossession prevention. And so obviously, I'm assuming most of us know that you have an asset, a car, or some other significant asset, you're making payments. When repossession, most of the times, again, we think about it with cars. Clearly, that means you're way, way behind if they're coming to take your car or other asset back. So that's the repossession. Let's start with that prevention. Typically, people are like how many months behind when you're getting to the point of repossession? What's about standard?
For vehicles, it's usually about 4 months of non-payment before they're coming to collect the vehicle.
So what does your company do to help people avoid foreclosure and repossession?
Okay, so I want to talk about there's differences there because foreclosure is in relation to your mortgage, your home. And we have counseling services called foreclosure prevention counseling. Or if you just ask for a housing session, you tell them that, tell us that you're in trouble with your mortgage. Then we have housing counselors that are NFCC certified, and a lot of them are HUD certified now. There's a new HUD ruling out where HUD requires certification for housing counselors to provide counseling. And so what we do is we have people go through their situation, their hardship, what they're facing, and then find out who their investor is for their mortgage, and then determine based on who their investor is, the type of options that they would have available to avoid foreclosure. And then explain that step to the consumer in terms of what kind of help that means for them, how they would apply, what that process looks like, how they need to follow up with the servicer to obtain that help and avoid foreclosure. So that's separate. When we're talking about repossession of vehicles, that's on the other side of the house, I like to say, because that's more along the lines of debt. The debt and budget counselors would be able to talk to them about that. We don't handle secured debts. And what I mean by that, by saying handled, is that we offer debt management plans. So in our credit counseling services space, the credit counselors will go through the credit report and find out what debts you're facing, what kind of struggles you're having with each of them, and then determine if we're able to help with the interest rates on the credit card. So that's on the unsecured debt side. And so we don't handle secured debts, but we would be able to educate the client on how they could have discussions with the lender for the car loan, and being able to approach the lender on what type of help they might be able to receive to avoid the repossession, or simply rework their budget, right? Get some of the other things that are a little bit more expensive, bring those down so that they can start to afford a payment on the vehicle. So there's two different services that we're talking about when we're talking about foreclosure and repossession, but both we'd be able to provide education and information on.
Temiko, based on your experience, are most people contacting you all once they're late or miss one payment, or have they typically missed several payments before they've reached out?
It's excuse me, it's really split. A lot of people who contact us are dealing with a loss of income, a reduction of income, some type of hardship where they are referred to us. So they end up finding us because they are experiencing that major change in their life. Whereas others, they do end up calling early because they recognize either through their creditors who refer to us, or their lender who also refers over to us to get that education. And so sometimes they are able to call before they get to the mess, so they know how to navigate the mess. So we do have a split. I would say probably on the higher side, because of the state of our economy and the pandemic, and so many people being in a loss or reduction of income scenario, that's probably the leading volume change right now for the last year. But we get people all over, in all walks of life and all levels of that process.
Temiko, if we could just take a minute and talk about how important it is before you're late, as soon as you know something is wrong, as soon as you know you've lost your job, as soon as you know, how important it is to immediately communicate with your creditor so you don't end up having to get to repossession or foreclosure?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the major pieces of information we emphasize for consumers when they do call us is to not bury your head in the sand. Don't be the ostrich. Make sure that you use your resources. We always teach that you've got to have a team. Anytime you need information, you have to go out to that, as you put it, your SME, and find out who your network of professionals are. If you need, a retirement services, you go to a financial planner. If you need legal advice, you go to an attorney. And so you really want to do that same thing for your finances, just like being a part of your network, Janai, and using someone like Money Management International, where we can actually help you navigate that road. What does that look like? And the earlier on you can talk to us, you really are giving yourself the opportunity to manage a lot of different options. Your options are increasing or higher when you start early versus later
Yeah.
on. If you wait till later on where things are really in dire straits,
Mhm.
sometimes that means that your options are limited at that point. And so we encourage people that as soon as you know something is wrong, you give us a call because it's a free service. You have someone that they can actually help you go through and talk about your specific struggles, because I think that people tend to understand that options are blanket. There's a one size fits all option for every person. That's simply not true. So to
Right.
have a professional on the phone with you early on to tell you what those options might look like is really advantageous.
Tamika, if we can for a second, can we just kind of talk about options for people who are either heading towards a money mess or maybe they're in one? But the earlier that they communicate, that could range from a maybe having a reduced payment, payments being tacked on to the end of the loan, um, anything else that people can have an idea of what their potential options will be if they begin to tell their story and communicate earlier.
Okay, so let's silo that into mortgage conversation, if
Okay.
we could. So when someone calls in and you are talking to a counselor, the earlier on you call, then you're looking at the least impacting options that help you to avoid foreclosure. So that might be a suspension of payments, a reduction of payments for a temporary amount of time. That could mean that they're going to go to more options if there's more of a hardship being experienced, if there's more of a permanent hardship being experienced. If you know early on that you're getting ready to experience a permanent hardship, then you can hold that discussion early on and not have to navigate late payments if you're
Yeah.
in contact with the servicer early on. So
Mhm.
I would say getting on the phone with a counselor is just so helpful because it takes all the pressure off. You can kind of
Right.
talk to the counselor about, what happened in life, and then what you need to happen that what would help you. Is it time that will help you? Is it a reduced payment that will help you? Do you just need to bring your payments current? And that might
Right.
help you. So based on your situation and the investor guidelines would determine what type of options, and how delinquent you are sometimes has a bearing on those options.
Understood. And anything else, Tamiko, whether we're talking from a repossession perspective or foreclosure, that you think it would be helpful for people to know who are, again, potentially in that situation or heading towards that?
I would say the biggest thing that we two things. One is to communicate, to not be afraid to talk to the person that you have the entity that you have a contract with, because that's essentially what it is. Not to be intimidated, to have a candid discussion about where you are and what needs to happen to continue to make good on that contract or to release it, to be able to find other solutions to realize that you're not able to continue on in that agreement. So to have the discussion upfront is very important. If you need to call us to help you with that discussion, then do so, but to communicate and not to just put it off. Procrastination can really bite you here, because these things are time sensitive. And so
Extremely.
anytime you can see that you might have a problem, it's okay to call then too, to say, I think I might have trouble with my payment next month and I'm
Yep.
concerned. and wanted to make you aware, entity that I pay. And then that discussion can go on from there. The second thing that I want to mention is that it's important for us to take the onus of the hardship, right? Life happens, emergencies happen, they're
Right.
going to happen. So in order for us to position ourselves well, we have to be able to take a look at our own situation and to dig out what things that caused us to be there, to no fault of our own. That's without emotion, right? It's going through dollars and cents and saying, what is my emergency situation look like now that I'm no longer in this, ideal situation that I want it to be in? And sometimes
Right.
that's the starting point of saying, what do I have control of? Do
Mhm.
I have $50 that I can withhold from wherever that money was going in this emergency situation, and just for temporary, make those sacrifices to get myself ahead?
Right. Ani, I see that you had a question.
I do. Hi, Temiko. So my question, how to navigate based on how you're explaining, is that the best way to avoid credit impact? Because usually that's what happens when people wait too late, or, I've had a friend who tried the negotiations herself as well. And I don't know if she ever had a counselor, but it just didn't end well from a credit perspective for her. And so I'm like, I'm just curious, like when you explain about talking early, does that always minimize the credit impact, or is there a way to avoid the credit impact of having a financial crisis and needing some help?
Okay, very good question. And so I'm going to hop over to credit side now. We talked a little bit about mortgage and how those work. Now, when you're talking about the creditors, again, a contract involved, right? You've signed something when you filled out your application. We're excited about being able to swipe that card, that there were some responsibilities that you signed to as well. And so when you call creditors early on, yes, they can do some things to mitigate, the expense temporarily. But even that was kind of a newer type of help that came about because of the pandemic. There was just too many people that were struggling. And so a
Right.
lot of people were able to contact their creditors directly to get some temporary help, right? And I think that's where you have to begin to do some soul searching and start saying to yourself, am I really accomplishing what I want to accomplish with the credit? And that if you're in hardship mode, that's a little different. Now you're just barely making minimum payments, or you're not able to make minimum payments. And so that conversation, I think, needs a little bit more support. And I think talking to a credit counselor would help a lot, because then you have a counselor who's going to go through all your options. You can either handle it on your own. This is how much it's going to cost you. This is how long it's going to take you. If you're just making minimum payments, of course, you can make a little bit more headway on that in savings and time when you make more than the minimums. But if you're in hardship or looking at a hardship, then that's a little daunting. So a lot of people are, when they're calling us, they're past that point. They're saying, well, this is really too difficult now.
Yeah.
Then you go into, do I have assets, right? Do I have assets that I can sell? Do I have extra vehicles? Do I have collectibles? Do I have something that I can just get rid of to
Use the
pay
cash.
down, or use the cash to pay it off? And then
Right.
some people may be at a point where, the income has dropped off now, and you're at 6 months, 12 months, and you've not been able to find work. A lot of people are in that
Mhm.
position. And so
Right.
you may look at your situation and say, well, right now, life has given me this set of cards, and this set of cards does not allow me to pay anymore. Based on my conversation with my counselor, I'm looking at the dollars and cents, and I just don't see this working. And so we may tell folks, go talk to, seek legal advice, talk to an attorney, find out what your rights and responsibilities are for your situation. And we never recommend any specific a legal instrument to be used. I'm using that language very specifically because it's important that people understand what their rights and responsibilities are in each state. And that's why a legal professional is going to help you really understand what that road looks like, and whether or not you want to travel down that road of the instrument they recommend. And that's if you're finding that you just cannot make any payments at all. And then the last, obviously, so that's very attractive to some, is the debt management plan. And that's where you send us one monthly payment. Excuse me. We send the monthly payment to your creditors for you. So we don't pay them off for you. You send the money to us. We forward it on to your creditors. In turn, they give you very, very low interest rates. We're talking single digit interest rates, sometimes down to zero, depending on the situation. And you're getting paid off with less than 5 years. If you stick to the payment plan, it's less than 5. If you pay more on the payment plan, you could get it paid off in 3 years, however long you see fit. But the major benefit there is that you take a pause, right? You kind of hold off on using credit for a while because it just got to be too much. And so while you're on the debt management plan, it allows you to pay it off, completely get off of credit card usage. And then you can go back to it with a better credit score. You go back to it with a better budget, and you have now credit can be used as a tool instead of an extra source of income. And that's, I think, where we get messed up.
Okay. Temiko and Ani, what I think I hear you saying is, first of all, it's important to know, based on your situation, is this kind of a temporary situation you're in? You just need help getting over the hump. Maybe, again, that could mean your creditor allowing you to skip a couple of payments, reducing your payments, tacking your payments on the back end of your loan, versus this might be a longer term situation that I'm in. Therefore, a different strategy may need to be executed at this point. Like, I'm not, I'm going to be out of work for 3 months or 6 months, something a little bit more extensive. Therefore, a completely different plan needs to be put in place so you don't end up facing repossession, foreclosure, and the ding that Ani is talking about that can happen on the credit.
No, what I heard Temiko say, which I think was powerful, that you need to take a break from credit. Most people, when they're in a situation, I've never heard anybody say it that way before. So I just thought it was very powerful in the moment when I heard you. We're still trying to use the credit, pay it off. We're mad, we're frustrated, but because we're trying to do all of the things. And like you said, it's just overwhelming right now. So we need to take a break from the credit because we're not using it in the right way, or have had in life happen, and we need to adjust. But that was just, I'm glad you said that. I need to take a pause from credit right now. So thank you for saying that.
Absolutely.
It just resonated a little differently when you said it that way. And the other thing that I think I heard you say, Janai, because I have a girlfriend going through this now, and I'm like, oh, I need to tell her about this. But their house is just having some major, it's a leak here, a leak and the costs all of a sudden are like here, and they're like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, oh, maybe this is a temporary thing, not that they've lost jobs or anything, but just are now encountering some really major expenses that are putting a burden on them in a different type of way. And so maybe, talking to a counselor could be helpful in this situation. So thank you.
Good. Yes, I wanted to make mention of the credit impact. And I know that a lot of people are concerned about what may happen to my credit as I'm navigating this mess. And so I think it's important that we also recognize when the credit score is working for us and being used as a tool versus this is just this esoteric number that's just following us around everywhere like a little gnat. Like, why are you not changing? And so when you're talking about, missing payments on your mortgage, or you're facing a hardship where you might miss a mortgage payment, going to piggyback right back on that same point of how critical it is to contact your servicer right away before you become delinquent, because you may be able to get assistance where your credit impact is less. Because of the way that you asked for the help and that you got ahead of it before you became delinquent. It could also impact the options that you may have after that temporary hardship that you're facing. So it is very critical that as soon as there might be something that causes you to miss your mortgage payment, that you contact the servicer right away. Contact us right away. We do play servicer calls with you too, and we can get on the phone with you if you're uncomfortable making that call, which sometimes is the biggest, the hurdle is just, I'm nervous about what they might say. You don't have to be nervous. You can do it on your own, but you can also do it with help. And then I also want to talk about the credit side, because for both of them, creditors have to report information to a credit report. They have to. It's according to the law, they have to report information. It's how they report it that changes depending on the type of help that you're getting and the actions that are being taken. And so that's why I wanted to mention about the mortgage side, because if you're getting help early on, they may not be counting you late. They're not going to count you late every single time because you've gotten that help before you fell delinquent. Versus the other side, the flip side of the coin is you fall delinquent. Now you're past due. Now you reach out to the servicer and you've gotten the help, but you're still being reported late because that payment is still technically past due. And so that's why, time is really important. When it comes to your creditors, if you're already making credit cards, if you're already making late payments, it's already impacting your score. If you're in a position where your payments are already falling behind, throw out credit score for right now. You're not using your credit as a vehicle to obtain major financing. Throw that number out right now. You're in recovery mode. So you don't have to be concerned with the score. The score will take care of itself as you progress, right? So just be mindful of that and don't get held up to the score and not being able, what about my credit score? If I use this debt management plan, well, are you using it for a vehicle, for a purpose right now? If it's not being used for a purpose right now and you're on a break and you're putting yourself in timeout for credit cards and putting yourself on a hardship budget to really address the debt, get it paid down, then the credit score isn't so much a big deal. And you can return to having that same importance when you're looking at seeking major financing again.
Right. And Temiko, when I hear you talk about that, it's almost like being clear on your priorities, ranking them. What is urgent? Urgent is, again, not falling behind, making sure that I'm communicating. What's important? Yes, of course, I'd like to preserve my credit score, but right now, that's not the primary thing that I'm focused on. Like, let me make sure that everything else is good first. That's the urgent part. And then here's what's important. And then whatever else that falls after important. That way, I think people don't get distracted once they're clear on the priorities and how to tackle everything. One thing too, Temiko, that you just made me think about, when you're calling your lenders, servicers, whomever they are, if whomever you're talking to is not friendly, is not helpful, please ask to speak to their manager. You don't have to tolerate that crap. You don't have to, because remember, you are a paying customer. Now, you might have some financial problems right now, but you've been paying. So please very politely ask to speak to someone else. Because a lot of times the person that answers the phone first anyway, a lot of times they don't even have the authority to make those type of decisions of, can you get a reduced payment or payment tacked on the back, all these other strategies. But don't tolerate that poor tone, disrespect, being degrading. You do not put up with that. Always ask the person's name, indicate the date and time of your call. You need to take impeccable records during this time. You have to be very proactive because you may have to have several phone calls. You call back in 3 days. Oh, yes, on June 9th, I spoke to Temiko Green at 1:36 p.m. and this is what she told me I need to do. So yeah, you want to have really tight, amazing record keeping, whether you're making the calls on your own or you're dealing with like a money management international as well. Don't just take your hands off the wheel and you got your stuff all over the place. Please be really organized. That'll be huge. People take you more seriously when you have your stuff together too. Yeah, so please think about that.